Today on Locked On Red Wings, Detroit acquires Jeff Petry from Montreal. Does he fit? And if so, where?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the Daily J, a WWJ News Radio podcast. Well, Scotty's the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And on today's episode, guys, a nice little break from the player previews as Steve Yzerman decided to make a move this afternoon, acquiring Jeff Petry, Ann Arbor native, Jeff Petry, son of Detroit Tigers 1984 World Series champion Dan Petry. Don't know if you guys knew that. It's not like they tell you every single time Jeff's in Detroit. He's a Detroit Red Wing now. 2 years left on his current contract. And Scotty, I mean, the first thing we should talk about is like break down the trade and talk about if we think it's a good trade. So I don't know if you have the info up in front of you, but if you want to break down what we gave up in return, go for it.
Yeah, well, I think for starters, we will. That made no sense. I was going to say 4 starters and then say we will get to this. So that doesn't make sense. I do want to lay out there that like we will. I think a majority of this conversation is not like, is this value good or bad? I think it's pretty. The word I'm going to use is obvious that like we made out better in this trade and we got the best player in the deal. I guess you can put it that way. So like I will talk about the value for sure. And I will get to that right in like 5 seconds. But I think a majority of this conversation really is like, what does the blue line look like now? And I think that that's probably what a majority of the show is going to end up being about. But yeah, I mean, it was Petry, as you said, last name there is Detroit royalty. Jeff Petry for Lindstrom and a 2025 it was. Oh, it's right there in front of me. 2025 fourth round pick.
Conditional fourth round pick.
Right. And then also as far as the salary retainment goes, I believe the Wings by the end of, like the 3 different teams who are now writing this dude a paycheck, I think the Wings are paying him 33%, a little bit over 33%. When it's all said and done of like his like actual yearly salary. So yeah, I mean, this is fine. Like, this is good. I we didn't get like the best defenseman in the NHL. This isn't like some groundbreaking thing, but in my eyes, this is just as simple as we just took our 7th D-man, like objectively our 7th D-man, the guy who without any question, without any shadow of a doubt, was absolutely the 7th best defenseman on the team. And we improved him. And like to a point where now it's a conversation of who even is going to be the 7th defenseman. I think that that's an upgrade. The blue line got better. The depth in this team got better. I have, and again, like you're not on the hook for a majority of the money that this dude's being paid. And there's not even that much term left. So like, I have a hard time finding like a real issue in this deal in a vacuum.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, we're sending Gustav Lindstrom back, a 2025 conditional 4th round pick. And the condition on that, by the way, guys, is Red Wings have 2 4th round picks that year, Detroit's and Boston's, and it'll be whatever pick is the later of the 2 that we send to Montreal. So, and on top of that, his contract, he gets paid $6.250. Red Wings are only on the hook for $2.3 million. That's how much his cap is going to hurt the Red Wings. You're paying for 2 more years, $2.3 million to Jeff Petry. In a vacuum, this, like you said, Scotty, I completely agree with you. It's a win. It's, and I mean, win-loss is, I feel like not every trade has to be on the scale of win-loss. But, this is a guy we talked about last offseason. I remember we did an episode about, because Montreal sounded like they were going to move on from him. And I was advocating at that point. We were advocating at that point to get Jeff Petry in a Detroit Red Wings uniform because he still had some gas left in the tank. And for a rebuilding team, he was kind of the perfect veteran presence who might want to go home. Instead, they went out and signed Ben Chiarot to a 4-year deal. But I digress. This offseason, it's pretty well confirmed at this point that Kent Hughes of the Montreal Canadiens did Jeff Petry a favor by trading him back to his hometown. And I think it massively complicates the defensive pairings, but that's a good problem to have. I tweeted about it, and I don't want to get into this now, but it gives Red Wings a lot of flexibility with their defensive pairings. Whereas before, you knew Gustav Lindstrom was going to be your seventh D-man. That's not so solid anymore, and that's a good problem to have because now you can rotate, solid defensemen in and out because Jeff Petry is capable of playing top pair minutes, and he has. Even as most recently as last year, he was still playing. If you look at his evolving hockey card, top pair level minutes with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and ultimately they missed the playoffs, and his production did slide last year. But, Jeff Petry, while having had his production slide a little bit and having 2 more years left, I think he'll be like 37 or 38 by the time his contract expires. I mean, it's still an upgrade over a 22-year-old, 23-year-old Gustav Lindstrom who didn't look like he had an NHL future ahead of him. So it gives the roster a lot of flexibility on who to play. And I think it's just if you're going to give it a win or a loss grade, I think it's a win for Detroit, and even bigger win for Detroit because they aren't paying him however much money the Canadiens were going to. Because again, Pittsburgh retained some on his trade back to Montreal, and then Montreal retained more. So Detroit's only paying 2.3. So you got a veteran D-man who's still productive on both ends of the ice for 2.3 mil. You just hope he doesn't regress too far that it kind of is like, why is this guy here?
And yeah, and hopefully that doesn't happen, and I don't think it will happen. But even if it does, then okay, then he's just your seventh D man.
Yeah,
You know what I mean, like it's really a low risk. I don't think the reward is like super high. I don't think that there's like at 35 years old that Jeff Petry is just going to turn into like I don't know, like one of the best defensemen in the league or something. Like it's not like a huge upside thing, but it's a very, very low risk move. And yeah, I mean, just from a pure value standpoint, I think it's hard to really be too upset. And when you talk about the win loss, not to, we don't have to talk about the Canadiens side of this really, like too terribly long, but I don't think that there has to be a winner and a loser in every trade either. Like, I don't think that this is like some awful, fleece. Like the Canadiens are like, oh my, you know what I mean? Like their fan base is like, oh my goodness, we just got absolutely fleeced. Like, I think they're like, okay, we got, even if it's not all of it, and we had to retain some of it, like we got a pretty big chunk of that contract off the books. We got a young defenseman,
and it's good for Lindstrom too. We can talk about that aspect as well.
He'll certainly get more of an opportunity there, and the Habs will see if they have the I don't know, ability to maybe develop him further than he ever was going to in Detroit. Like this, there doesn't have to be like a big loser. There doesn't have to be someone to point and laugh at on every trade. And I think that this is one where like both teams are sitting back afterwards going like, yeah, this will work out well. I'm pretty pleased with this.
Yeah. I mean, and that's talking in a vacuum. And I feel, I don't know if we should start this conversation now. Should we just go to an early break? I know it's only 8 minutes in. Yeah, get out of the way, and then we can get into phase 2 of the conversation.
I think that is a majority of the conversation. It's just like what the blue line really looks like now on a nightly basis.
What the blue line really looks like. But I also want to talk, too, because in a vacuum, we talked about in a vacuum, this is a good deal to make. You moved out 2 assets that weren't really going to affect your team, and you brought in a guy who's still effective for 2 more years and wants to be here. So, like in a vacuum, it makes sense. But when you look at the Red Wings D-core as a whole, you have to start asking questions like, why did they bring in another veteran? Another veteran, middle of the road. Like it's a very middle of the road defensive core, if you ask me. And that's not necessarily bad. Like I'd love middle of the road because it's better than last year. But it's just I have some questions about the overall outlook of the defensive core, and it's got some pros and it's got some cons. So I want to talk about that too in segment 2. That was unintentional. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about FanDuel. Football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, I got to ask. So you're looking at this defensive core now, and it's a lot better than it was last year. And there's the pro, right? That's the pro that we're giving Steve Yzerman in this build. But then you also look at it, and it's a lot of like middle of their career, towards the end of their career, veteran defensemen. You got Ben Sherratt, you got Shane Gostisbehere, you got Justin Hall, Jake Wallman and Mort Sutter, obviously, like your guys you're putting up on a pedestal and being like, these are the guys. But you got Oli Mata, and now you have Jeff Petry. There's just an influx of, I don't want to call, Oli Mata older. He's only 28, but like guys who have been around the league and are veterans, and none of them are top tier defensemen, middle of the pack defensemen. Like, this defensive core looks very middle of the pack, and that is an improvement, but that's not also what you want for a team that's trying to push for the playoffs on the flip side, and that's the con. So while in a vacuum, this trade is good, and I think the Red Wings got more value in the trade than the Montreal Canadiens, I'm wondering if it makes sense for the Detroit Red Wings to acquire an aging Jeff Petry when they have guys like Simon Edvinsson, Albert Johansson, and William Wallinder in the prospect pool that are seemingly ready to make a push here very soon. I know Edvinson's, still recovering from his injury, but he played 9 games last year. Albert Johansson would have played NHL games if it weren't for the fact that he was injured. I mean, this is just another roadblock to these guys making the NHL roster. And I know that Steve Yzerman has said guys who have earned it will play, but are you really going to healthy scratch a guy who's, whoever you have as your 7th D man, and we'll get to that when we do projected defensive pairings, but like one of your 7th D man is going to be making more than $2 million. There's just no way around that. You don't have a single guy except for Moritz Seider in your defensive core who's making less than $2 million. So you're going to have a really expensive healthy scratch. So that's my question is while in a vacuum, Red Wings got more value, does the trade make sense for Detroit?
Yes. I genuinely, I don't see everything you just laid out as even a remote issue. Like, honestly, I it's not even like on my radar of things that I'm even mildly concerned about. Like, this is a team. This is how good organizations are ran. Like, this is what like good, healthy, sustained products look like. And I know that hasn't happened in like forever, but like that's what sustained product looks like. You have solid NHL starters, solid, professional top end starters that are solidified in all of their roles. And then you still also have top prospects that can break through. An injury is going to happen. When was the last time all 7 members of a blue line stayed completely healthy throughout an entire season? True. Never. So like you're going to have an opening at some point, just like regardless because of that. But for me, it's just I know that like I get heat for like putting everything in baseball terms, but like the Dodgers, that's like what the Dodgers for the last decade have had one of the best major league teams ever. That's probably a stretch, but like one of the best rosters year in and year out. They have one of the best rosters in baseball and also have one of the best prospect rankings in baseball every single year. And like, that's just how and I'm not saying that this blue line is like the best blue line in the NHL or anything. As you said, like it's probably much closer to a middle of the road defensive unit as a whole, but like that will iron itself out. Like the Red Wings are not just going to look around and go, well, we have Jeff Petry now. I guess we're going to give up on Simon Edvinsson. Like, that's not going to happen. They're not just going to go, well, we have Oli Mata, so like forget William Wallinder and like forget Albert Johansson. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, when they earned their shot, they will find a way to put them in the lineup, and like they just will. Like they will absolutely 100% find a way. And as far as like, oh, well, then you're healthy scratching someone expensive, I could give less of a damn. Like, if you have cap space, like I don't care. Like,
Scotty bringing up the cuss words.
Unless if this team was like up against the cap, maybe I'd be like, oh, like, that probably isn't a great use of funds. But like, if you have the money, use it, dude. I don't really care about that. So like, I view this as like healthy depth much more than I view it as an issue.
Yeah, and I mean, like, and Jay Fresh tweeted out his war card, and it's in. Here's the thing. Let's look at this real quick because I want to weave this in here, and I don't know a fluid way of blending this in without just sounding incredibly awkward. So here's his war card for this upcoming season, courtesy of Jay Fresh on Twitter, and you can see that over the course of the last 3 years, he has been a overall 50% WAR. So like literally, quite literally middle of the pack, slightly above even strength offense at WAR, slightly above even strength defense. He is a good veteran two-way defenseman who has seen his play slightly decline the last 3 years. Each of the last 2, you can see it in the WAR percentile timeline. While his defense has actually gone up a little bit, his offense has taken quite a bit of a step back. But even in his step back year last year, he still put up half a point a game in 60 games. He was 32 points in, I think, 65 games played here. Give me a second to double check on that. 61 games played, 31 points. So slightly above half point per game, which is a good defensive production, especially from a 35-year-old. So if you can get that the next 2 years, despite the fact that he'll be 36 and 37, and I think he'll actually turn 38 in December of next year. I think he's 36 right now. This says age 35, but that was this time last year.
He turns 36 in December.
Okay, so he'll be 37 when his contract is up with Detroit. He's got 2 more years left. If he can continue to bring this production, even if it's at a declining rate, he can serve as a 7th pair defenseman with the Detroit 7th defenseman or 3rd pair defenseman with the Detroit Red Wings. And with the money you're paying him, he'll be obviously the least expensive of your 7th D-man. But I think that overall, I agree with you, Scotty, that he is a pretty good utility to have. You can see here his time on the ice, his average for the last 3 years is top line minutes, top pair minutes. He was playing top pair minutes with Pittsburgh last year. Had over 1,000 minutes played, I believe, with the Pittsburgh Penguins. I could be mistaken on that. I'm going to double check on that while we're talking. But he plays a lot of time.
1,300 minutes last year.
Thank you. 1,300 minutes last year. This is a guy who plays a lot despite his age.
The year before.
So while his play might be declining, he's going to be put into a lesser role with the Detroit Red Wings. I expect Jeff Petry to be your 3rd pair defenseman. If at worst, he'll be your 7th defenseman. So being put in a position where he's not facing the other team's elite of the elite, while his age might hinder his production, the competition he's going against will help, keep that consistent. So he might not get 30 points next year because he'll be playing 3rd pair minutes. I think he's going to be a pretty solid 3rd pair, 7th defenseman with the Detroit Red Wings. Not that I even necessarily think he's going to be the 7th defenseman, because let's not forget also the value he has as a right side D-man. Gustav Lindstrom obviously had that, but there was never any question that Gustav Lindstrom was going to be your 7th D-man because he just wasn't very good. The J-Fresh card for Gustav Lindstrom was, and I'm so happy that he gets a real opportunity with Montreal now, hopefully, to really take a step forward in his game. I know the Red Wings were kind of disappointed in the lack of development he showed, but he was a 9% WAR over the last couple of years. And I know he didn't get a ton of playing time, but the playing time he did get, it just did not show well. So if he can bring us 50 percentile WAR in the 3rd pair, he's going to be pretty solid. He will. Again, I just worry about being clogged with middling defensemen and whether or not that will affect the ability of some of the young guys making the leap to the NHL. But again, I try and reassure myself with the idea here. I'm having this argument with myself right now, Scotty, that Steve Yzerman has said that guys who earn it will earn it. And if there's a player who's making a lot less money and on a rookie contract that has earned it, he's not going to just play a guy because they make a lot of money.
Yeah, well, it's also just it's not that hard to it's not like all 7 of these guys are under contract for the next 4 years for $4 million AAV.
And that's a really huge thing to bring up too. That's a good point.
You know what I mean? If they really want to make a spot, okay, you halfway through this season, if Oli Mata is a traffic cone out of nowhere, and you want to give one of those 3 guys we just mentioned a legitimate look, then you put them on waivers. If someone picks them up, great, you're off the hook for the money. If no one picks them up, then guess what? You're going to cut them and you'll eat the year and a half you have, you know what I mean? You have left of a not too high AAV in Oli Mata's contract, or you work out to buy it or whatever. It's not it's just going to be impossible to find. I'm really seriously, I cannot even express how little I'm worried about this scenario where the kids, they absolutely, if they earn an opportunity and it's very clear that they have earned an opportunity, they will absolutely find their way onto the roster. Jeff Petry is not going to roadblock Edvinsson if he's the best player the Griffins have ever seen. They're not going to be oh, well, I don't know, man. We have Oli Mata and Jeff Petry now. Guess we're just kind of stuck here. They'll find out. For me, it's a good problem to have because you have less pressure on those guys. Like they have to produce more to get that opportunity. There's less pressure on them. And then obviously, like I said earlier, someone's going to get hurt eventually. It's hockey, and no blue, like, complete defensive unit ever has, stayed 100% healthy the entire season.
No, you're completely right. And like, to your credit, you have Petry and Olimata who are here for 2 more seasons. Then you have Wallman, Justin Hall, and Sherratt who are here for 3 more seasons. So it's like there will be roster turnover as time goes on. And, going into those guys' final seasons next year, it's nothing to say they can't just easily be dealt. So, I mean, I agree with you that what I'm concerned with isn't a major concern, but I would be remiss if I didn't address that concern also. It's a better defensive core, but it is very logjammed with veterans out of nowhere all of a sudden.
Sure,
I think it's worth noting.
For sure. I think it is worth noting. And I think it's worth noting because it really, and I guess this is another point that I guess I've been trying to make and not articulating very well, is like, this is the difference between long-term and short-term outlook. I am not worried in the slightest about Edvinsson, Johansson, and Vollander getting a legitimate look at the NHL level at some point over the next couple of seasons. Not even a little bit. But if you're talking just about the 2023-2024 season, then obviously that becomes a different conversation where it's like, yeah, now the path for them to get to the NHL roster, like on opening night, like we were talking, in May about like, oh, what are the chances Edvinsson's on the opening night roster? And like, like we said, like Johansson would have made the NHL if he didn't get hurt at the end of last season. Like, those conversations for sure become a lot more tricky in the immediate future. But long-term plan wise, I can't express enough how little of a concern it is for me.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, we're going to try and figure out again what the Red Wings defensive core could look like. So make sure you
it's
stay
a fun
tuned.
game. It's an evergreen. We play every week pretty much.
So stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, let's try and figure out these defensive pairings again. It's crazy. You just immediately throw away basically all the episode we did a couple weeks ago because we didn't think the Red Wings would make another trade, but I guess it's foolish of us to do a roster outlook episode in the middle of August, but forgive us. It's the off season. Anyways, Scotty, let's do this. Let me get this up here. I quickly made a cap-friendly thing so people can have a visual if they're watching us on YouTube. But now I'm going to try and find it. There we go.
Hockey is a sport.
Hockey is a sport that we like to play. You guys get to see these ads that pop up for me. That's fun. But anyways, defensive pair 1. Do we even have to talk about it?
No, we do not.
That's penalty kill. First of all, let's make sure we get these in the right area. Where is the power play penalty kill? Where? Oh, I'm an idiot. It's been a while since I've done this. I'm sorry, guys. Forgive me.
We knew that, dude.
Yeah, I'm literally staring it right in the face, but I was looking over the special teams for some reason. So you got Seider and Wallman as your top pair 1. Who's your pair 2?
It's a great question, man. I honestly, hold on. Let me zoom in so I can see better.
Let me zoom in for you too. Boom, there we go.
I think that I am still fairly confident that the second pair will be Ghost and Justin Hall.
Interesting. Okay. So
are you not? Do you have a different thought for 2?
No, it's not that I disagree. I am just genuinely baffled. And I talked about this. It's a good problem to have. Trading of Gustav Lindstrom and acquiring an actual NHL caliber defenseman allows your team to have so much more flexibility with your defensive structure. So like if we include a guy who's going to be your 7th D-man right now, that doesn't mean they're going to be 7th D-man the entire year. Well, like things could shift.
And even, I mean, you can go back to our episodes and, right after free agency, right? Like, I mean, we had made that point a couple of times, even when we did have like a bona fide seventh D man, it was just going to be Lindstrom. Like even the six that we had, like, I mean, I can remember multiple conversations where we had said, like this is going to juggle a lot. Like they're probably going to play matchups and see what works and what doesn't, and try different fits against different either schemes or just trying different personnel groups just for the sake of trying different personnel groups. That was when we had six. Like, when we had like, okay, these are the six though. Now, I mean, it becomes even more of a toss up on a night to night basis. I appreciate this exercise because I think it's important to do and important to lay out, but I think we're going to see a million different combinations
and
of the blue line throughout the course of the season.
I really do think it's possible that Ghost Despair plays third pair and Sherratt plays with Justin Hall. I don't want that to happen, but I do see a reality where that is your second pair.
Well, then,
but at the same time,
sorry, I don't mean to cut you. No, I feel like I keep cutting you off.
No, you're good. It's just like I said, there's a lot to think about here because while it is important to have left side defensemen play left side and right side defensemen play right side, that's not an end all be all. We all know Ghost Despair and Sherratt, despite being left-handed, can play on the right side. In fact, Ghost Despair historically has had about 50% of his ice time play on the right side, despite being left-sided or left-handed. But I think Jeff Petry is a consistent enough defenseman who can provide a slightly above average offense. He's a slightly above average two-way defenseman still, despite his age, that I think that he could earn an everyday spot on the right side, be it on the bottom pair. I mean, I think you're looking at a situation where Olli Maatta or Ben Sherratt could be your seventh D man, as crazy as that sounds. I mean, but Ben Sherratt didn't have a great year last year. And, Olli Maatta, we did and earned himself an extension, despite the fact that he came down with, I think, mono at one point, and that's why he missed a lot of time. But Olli Maatta's skill set is also pretty limited. And the fact that he's like solely a defensive defenseman. So like at best, he's a third pair defenseman with this team. So like, I really think you're looking at a situation where on your right side, it's going to be Seider, Hall, and Petry. And on the left side, it's going to be Woolman, Ghost Despair, and then either Sherratt or Maatta. I genuinely think that might be what you're looking at, as either Sherratt or Maatta being your seventh D man. And I talked about in segment 2, Scotty, about it's going to be a really expensive guy in the press box, but this is the situation that Steve Yzerman has made it. And it was clearly intentional. So, and again, this defensive core is without a doubt better than it was last year. I don't want to make it sound like I'm complaining. Like this is a improved defensive core. It's just an expensive scratch every single night, no matter who it is, assuming they're healthy.
Which again, like I mean, if you have the cap, why not? I don't really care. But like that is objectively true. I think that man, like, so if you're really set on, not that I'm saying you specifically are really set, but like if there is a world where this coaching staff is set on Sherratt and Hall on a pair together.
And I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying.
No. I know that. That's why I made that stipulation. Like, I'm not saying you specifically, but like if that is something that they think works well, then why wouldn't you just make that the second pair even, or third pair rather?
No, that's a good point.
And then you can do Ghost Petry left, right, or Maatta Ghost left, right, and seventh Petry.
Yeah, I think
and then you can have the two just have the most expensive third pair in the history of hockey. And you know what I mean? Like I think that if you were to put them on a pair together, you would. I don't see. It's August 16th, but like I don't see any justification right now in having Ghost outside of your top 4. I think I just don't see a world in which that's like putting the best hockey team on the ice every night. And so I think, and like Ghost gives you the great flexibility of like, you can either do, like I said, you can either do Ghost Petry left, right, or you can do Maatta Ghost left, right, because he can play either. But if Hall and Sherratt find themselves on a pair together, I think that has to be your third pair.
Yeah. I think you're looking at a situation here where you're going to have a lot like last year, a rotating seventh defenseman.
Right.
But it's just going to be a lot more expensive, but also a lot more talented than it was.
Also better,
last season.
right?
Yeah. And again, like that's the argument I'm having within myself is that this is a much better defensive core, but it's just laden with veterans on, not cheap contracts. So it's like, I mean, I guess that's kind of that comes with the territory.
Would you rather have kept Lindstrom?
No. I like, that's why I say in a vacuum, like,
then,
this trade makes sense.
There you go. Yeah.
It just makes it really hard to try. I mean,
Lindstrom's young and cheap. Like that doesn't inherently like make it more appealing.
Yeah. So
like
I was definitely more okay with Lindstrom being your seventh defenseman, knowing he made next to no money and had like no NHL future. But that's not a good mentality to have. That like your seventh defenseman shouldn't be a guy you don't trust. Like that doesn't make any sense.
There's a difference between easier decision and better defensive core. Like Lindstrom was certainly, it was the slam dunk, obviously, but I mean, this is significantly better. Like this is, I'm not trying to make Petry sound like a world beater, but like, I mean, this is objectively, your blue line just got like objectively a big upgrade.
It's deeper and it has a lot of flexibility in terms of pairing. And that flexibility in terms of pairing is what makes it so hard to decide.
Well, you have multiple dudes, right? You have multiple dudes who can play both sides too, which certainly helps the flexibility as well.
These 5 defensemen here, outside of Wallman and Seider, these 5 defensemen, Gostisbehere, Petry, Sherratt, Hall, and Mata could just, I don't know what it could look like on opening night. I'm pretty confident Mata isn't going to go above your third pair unless he just like shows out this year.
Yeah, agreed.
But like Sherratt could be anywhere between pair 2 and 7th D-man. I mean, I feel the same thing with Jeff Petry. He could be pair 2 to 7th D-man. Mata is third pair or 7th D-man. So I don't think Justin Hall is going to, I don't know. Justin Hall could be your 7th D-man. I don't know. The only 3 defensemen who I think are a surefire to be every day in this roster on this lineup is Wallman, Seider, and Gostisbehere. The other guys, I'm like, any one of them could be rotating in and out of your 7th D-man slot. And it's a good problem to have because the roster is more competitive.
Yeah, for sure. I would still default to, I think I would still default to Petry being your 7th more nights than not. Just because, I mean, of all the dudes we've mentioned, like obviously Wallman is up there at the top, but like Mata's the only like pure left, right?
Yes.
Like, and I know that doesn't mean, like just because they can play both doesn't mean like that's not a bad thing. But I think that he just had a solid year, and I think putting him down in the 3rd for left side is just a kind of a slam dunk thing early on in the season. But yeah, we're definitely going to see a lot of rotations throughout the year. And I guess to your point, if salary does matter at all, then in the decision making, technically we're paying Petry the fewest out of.
But salary shouldn't matter, right? That's the
point
we're trying to make.
Like it definitely won't. I'm just saying, like if that means anything to anyone, like he will be the cheapest one. But yeah, that's not going to matter. I think. Yeah, my gut tells me that Petry is he's gonna be the 7th more nights than maybe anybody else, like by the end of the season. But that doesn't mean that it's gonna be like frequent.
That's what's funny is I actually feel like Sherratt or Mata could end up being the 7th D-man. I think Petry.
Mata's going to be an easy candidate as well. I don't disagree with that over the course of the season.
Because Petry's still a pretty solid 2-way defenseman despite his age. And if his performance is anywhere near what it has been in recent years, like he could easily, I mean, again, like he was a 50% WAR at 35 years old despite playing top pair level minutes. So like you put him on a lower pair, he's going to be fine.
So I guess to the, and I know we got to wrap it up here, but I guess to the salary conversation, again, it shouldn't matter. I think Ben Sherratt would be a spectacular 7th D-man on this team. But I mean, that is one where like, salary doesn't matter. We just said 2 seconds ago, well, if Ben Sherratt was making $800K, I promise you we'd all just be looking at this roster and going, yeah, Ben Sherratt's the 7th D-man. But he's making
4.7.
Literally is the highest paid D-man on this entire blue line. So that's not the conversation we're having.
Well, and it's also worth being, and I don't know how true this is. I read something on the internet, so don't take that with a grain of salt.
You shouldn't do that.
I'm just prefacing with the fact that I read this on the internet, so I don't know how true it is. But saw people saying that Jeff Petry and Ben Sherratt had pretty good chemistry in their time in Montreal together. So, I mean, that's a realistic, because you got to think about chemistry too. I know we're at 35 minutes already, but thinking about chemistry as well. I mean, Ben Sherratt is more of a defensive defenseman, and I'm saying that in air quotes. He's physical. Jeff Petry can play both sides of the ice fairly solidly. So it's like, when you're trying to figure out chemistry as well, I mean, that matters a whole bunch too. Basically, what it comes down to, guys, is when trying to figure out these defensive pairings is, I'm gonna be blunt, I have no idea. And I like that idea. I like that it's not obvious. I like that it could be literally anyone in the bottom 4 defensemen, could be anywhere. So it's a good problem to have, and hopefully Derek alone can figure it out for me, because God knows I can't.
For sure. One little tidbit before we wrap up. NHL active point leaders for Michigan-born players. Okay. So top 10 career points for Michigan-born players in the NHL. The Red Wings now have number 2, number 4, number 5, and number 10, all on that list.
We didn't even talk about the fact that Steve Ersman keeps stocking up on Michigan-born athletes.
Yeah, Larkin is 2, DeBrincat's 4, Petry's 5, and Kopp is 10.
Nice.
They have everyone in everyone in the top 5 except for Krug, who's at the top, and then Kyle Connor, who's 3, and then they have Copper down at 10. So just interesting. They have 4 of the 10. Like, that doesn't make them the best necessarily, but 4 of the 10 highest career point totals for Michigan-born players in the NHL right now.
Yep. And then the final note, guys, is Robert Mastrosimone. Mastrosimone. I don't even know how to pronounce that name. Second round pick, 54th overall in the 2019 NHL draft by the Detroit Red Wings, not signed to an entry-level contract by the 5 p.m. deadline on Tuesday. So he is officially an unrestricted free agent, no longer with the Red Wings organization. He played, when the Red Wings drafted him, he was with Boston University. He transferred to Arizona State this past year, had 42 points in 38 games played. Never impressed the Detroit Red Wings enough to earn an entry-level contract. So he no longer a prospect of Detroit Red Wings. Rumor is he's looking to turn pro, so he'll probably land in either an AHL or an ECHL contract here, unless he goes overseas. And that's really it. That's the note. And Red Wings, one less prospect in the organization.
Yes. I was trying to think of something else I could say, because we've said one last note like 5 times in a row now, and I was just trying to think of if I could think of anything else. But I can't. So I guess that's the end.
Good job, buddy. We'll be back on Friday with a new episode. Let us know what you think of the Jeff Petry deal, and thank you, Scotty. Everyone knows I am bald. It is well-known fact. Let us know what you think of the Jeff Petry deal. Where do you think he'll fit? And if you think that this deal was a good idea. So we'll be back on Friday. Final thoughts?
We ball.
Same time, same place. Your team every day.
Every day.